Okay, let's get into the World War II spotter cards in terms of our module, which is really about movement preparation, and in this case, um, how we reduce um, how we reduce our response time. How can we reduce response time? And I think the spotter cards are fascinating in that aspect because yes, and we went over them. There's these deck of cards that has all the silhouettes of the various aircraft involved in World War II, specifically the European theater of the war over Europe. And I think the key factor here is whether you're another fighter pilot or maybe a bomber, or maybe you're on the ground looking up at planes and you're an anti-aircraft um, battery, probably almost the most important for them. I mean, because they're actually looking up in the sky and trying to figure out who they should shoot at. And you realize that from these cards that that's no small task. They all, just at first glance, look very similar. You have to really dig deeper and look at the different engine configurations or the tail fin or more subtle clues that can help you tell whether it is a U.S. fighter plane or an enemy. There's no big signs or in the movies they're very clear to show you, oh, here's a big, they show you a close-up of the plane and there's the swastika and there's the pilot and then or the Red Baron or whoever it is. It's obviously very easy for them to make you quickly show you who's who. But this is a very different situation, looking thousands of feet into the sky and trying to figure it out. So to me, this really gets at information processing and kind of fits into that model a little bit better in that you're developing a memory bank of these silhouettes based on the cards so that you can quickly narrow down and which plane you need to worry about, right? And then there's a bunch of response choices based on that flow from that initial response. But that initial choice, that initial thing you're trying to figure out, your two responses, friend or foe, or your sort of paths. And then from there, there's other things that'll start to come into play, right? Or for the person on the ground looking up, okay, friend or foe, obviously your response time then is how quickly can I fire upon the foe. So to me, it really kind of neatly fits into that kind of sense as you've built up experience, you're building up experience with those cards, maybe already have some existing experience in the field, and then you are using that to process what you're seeing visually, right? The ecological approach, I think it was harder for me to kind of see how this would fit in. I think in terms of reducing the time, movement time or response time, I would think it's kind of a secondary choice. Okay, you've made that first decision, friend or foe. If it is a foe, then it kicks in and you sort of talk more about affordances. Okay, I'm in a big bomber and I see a whole bunch of enemy fighter planes. I have a set of things I need to do as a pilot in that scenario. I send people to man the guns, or I turn around and go back, or I evade, or who knows what those are. But there would be maybe a set of things you would need to respond to quickly based on that decision. And that's kind of like an affordance. I'm a bomber, they're fighters, I'm in trouble. Or on the other hand, you're in a squadron of fighters and you see a bomber all alone up in the sky that's an enemy. Okay, hey, let's attack. We have a different set of affordances based on our own capabilities. So I suppose you can think about it as an ecological approach too, to reducing how much time it's going to take you to make that decision. But the cards are really, to me, fitting more neatly into the information processing theory. And then with regards to the other theories on how we reduce or what affects response time, number of response choices. And we talked about Hicks' law, but I'm not so sure this is really a Hicks law thing because we're not limiting the choices that we are able to, our response choices. We're seeing, again, that main one is friend or foe. It's going to be one or the other. We can't get it down to one. I suppose if we fly back over the United States, we know that we're never going to see enemies, and that's going to be the very safest, right? So in a way, I suppose you could limit your response choices, but in this scenario, we're obviously dealing with a situation where it's going to be friend or foe. I suppose, yeah, and if you're in a situation where there's other planes in the sky, you can't control how many are in the sky. They're just there, and you got to start processing. So I don't know that how we respond, the number of choices doesn't really change dramatically. Now that second level, when we talk more about the affordances, maybe then you have some response choices. But again, that's more dictated to you in this scenario. So I'm not sure Hicks' law is necessarily what applicable directly to this. But obviously we're trying levels of uncertainty, we're trying to reduce through that information processing and knowing, yeah, we have seen, we know this is the enemy, we can fire upon them. On the anticipation piece, I would say also that, I mean, again, that's sort of this. If you're seeing them and you recognize those relevant clues that tell you what's what, you're anticipating not only that it's an enemy, but again, in the case of those secondary decisions, what can I anticipate that aircraft to be able to do? What are its capabilities? So you can, by knowing what the plane is, you can start to anticipate what you need to do next, right? For period consistency, I don't think this necessarily relates directly to these cards, but I do think of a scenario where there's, say, an air raid siren and planes have to scramble. So if you're in you probably start to know if sirens go off, and there's a certain amount of time before those enemy planes will start arriving over your head. So there's in World War II you hear about all the jet pilots jumping into their planes once they hear that siren and get up in the sky, because they know they only have so much time before those bombers are starting to come over the skies of their city. So there's some part of that. I don't know, these cards aren't maybe directly speaking to that. Psychological refractory period, that was more about fakes and about sort of reacting one way and not the other. I think that, again, these cards don't directly speak to that, although certainly in air, dogfighting or combat, aircraft to aircraft, there's probably situations where planes do different moves to try to make the enemies think they're doing something, but they're not. And I know where camouflage fits into that as well. Obviously, planes also have camouflage. I used to build model airplanes as a kid, and the bottom, it was always painted like a light blue or a white, so up against the sky, it's harder to see that silhouette. And conversely, the top side of the plane is always a camouflage, like a forest or a green or a brown, so that if you're a plane above looking down, you may have a harder time looking. And again, that would slow response time, right? If you don't immediately recognize what you're seeing down there, camouflage could be something. But again, that's more of a disguise, not necessarily kind of a fake out where you're going one way, but then you got to come back the other because you missed it. And then stimulus response compatibility, I didn't see really a direct implication here that fit into this. So again, overall, I think it was the information processing model with some of those affordances in there. Probably not directly a Hicks thing, but more about how fast can you make those decisions and identify a plane. And then as a last kind of a little thing, again, talking about Hollywood. And what Hollywood does a little differently is they want to make it clearer so you understand the plot and so you understand what's going on. So this next slide, quick, just for fun, before I switch, see how quickly you can identify the enemy, the good guys and the bad guys, right? So here goes, 3, 2, 1. Okay, right. So there's your Star Wars example. If they had a whole bunch of X-wings, the Empire had X-wings and the Rebels had X-wings. Well, you look up at all these battles and wait, who's who, right? But obviously the TIE fighters of the Empire are a completely different looking silhouette and kind of unusual in this little pod in between these two panels. And then of course Darth Vader has his own kind of branded, a little bit different one, but very quick. But Hollywood obviously wants you to see very quickly. I guess, again, in certain situations, quickly who's who, so you kind of, oh yeah, there's the good guys, there's the bad guys, and you can follow the plot, and you're not confused, scratching your head, who's who. Anyways, just for fun, it was that one to kind of lighten it up a little after all the war talk. So thanks very much, and have a good one, guys.